So, a few years ago, there was a man who went up to the moon, there was a wall that got torn down, and a union that got dissolved, and now that all that stuff's over and done with, we have this game called Papers, Please! And it might be the most conventionally quote-unquote fun product of this weird post-pop indie work game movement. And by conventionally fun, I mean to say that Papers, Please is a technically polished product. It feels good, it sounds good, it looks good enough, and it has a sense of reward and punishment that hooks you into wanting to win. But that's where all its conventional qualities end. Winning in this game isn't necessarily glorious, and given the setting and subject matter, it shouldn't be. For those who played the free demo back in February, the core experience of playing the full version of Papers, Please is pretty much the same thing. You're working the border checkpoint of an impoverished communist nation in the early 80s that's somewhere east of Berlin and west of Beijing. Immigrants line up towards an inspection desk and hand you a bunch of paperwork. You scan it over, checking for discrepancies, typos, and forgeries, and after violating a few of their rights, you either let them pass or send them back home. And that's the whole core of the game. You're a literal paper pusher. The most basic and common action in this game is just sliding papers around a desk. And believe it or not, it feels surprisingly good, mostly thanks to some really crisp, crinkly paper sound effects and a sharp pixel art style that filters out all but the most necessary information. Plus, the printer sound effect you get when you make a mistake is really grating. For some reason, that noise drove me nuts, and it makes screwing up feel that much worse. As the game goes on, the nation's rules, regulations, and policies change. More types of paperwork get added to the pile, so keeping your desk organized and free of clutter becomes a secondary objective to processing the immigrants through. A few twists and turns later, you're suddenly deciphering coded messages and actually shooting down trespassers. But all that is just mechanical. As the demo hinted at, the full game has a lot of stories to tell on the other side of that counter. You're catching glimpses of these characters' lives while they're at their most vulnerable. The robotic and almost anonymous bureaucratic actions on your end carry heavy emotional weight. Depending on how you interpret your country's strict immigration policies, you might break up families of war refugees or inadvertently traffic prostitutes. You're given 2 chances to make mistakes before an invisible supervisor starts docking your pay, and weighing where, when, and how to let some of these characters slip through the wall creates an intersection of time, ethical, and monetary pressure. In other words, this game makes processing paperwork way more exciting and stressful than it has any right to be, because it gives those actions long-term mechanical and contextual consequences. There are multiple branching story paths that eventually lead to 20 different endings, and they all depend on who you let through, how many mistakes you make, and how fast you can push all those papers. Before long, you make contact with a resistance movement, and diplomats and spies start trying to make their way through, and suddenly your decisions carry historical weight. You're seeing recurring characters show up enough times to develop arcs, and a bunch of minor little details to this universe suddenly become important. Even the names of these cities are relevant to the international politics going on, which are also influenced by the country's position on the map, and whether or not you play to the certain factions that go through your checkpoint at critical moments can determine how the rest of the entire story plays out. But all things considered, this game tells its story in such an unorthodox and clever way that I'm ready to recommend it based on its uniqueness alone. I mean, what genre would you call this thing? Is it a puzzle game? Is it a work simulator? Is it a point-and-click adventure? It tells a darkly humorous political satire on a really small stage, and the central gameplay mechanic is the most boring kind of work imaginable, but the places it takes you and the things it has you do without ever leaving that desk feel so natural in this setting that it's also kinda creepy too. So the game is a clever and unique experiment into familiar and realistic territory, and it works. Lucas Pope pulled this off very well, but the one slip-up in the process might have been the free demo he released half a year ago. Mainly because there's not a substantial amount of new content added to the final build. The game is only $10, but it's still pretty close to the same experience you can get for free. There's a minor bit of audio-visual polish, there are a couple new types of paperwork to manage, and also an upgrade system that adds new keyboard shortcuts to the interface, but it's a 4-hour and $10 game that has you doing the same exact stuff you did for free for 1 hour in the demo. The problem is that after a few of those hours, the repetition of processing people's papers over and over again starts to feel less quirky and ironic and more like actual work. If anything, it doesn't really change or add to the experience of the demo, it just intensifies it. Okay, hear me out. This process gets really hard sometimes for no reason. On some days, I swear every last person in this line is trying to hide something. So every damn time you don't probe over every little detail your supervisor yells at you. And I get it, I flunked up, okay? I admit it. But do you want to do this job? I'm just one guy here, give me a break. This place is a goddamn mess. It's clear that this broke-ass government has me understaffed and insecure. People are blowing each other up right outside my office, and the criminals are giving me more money than my employers. And it's no wonder I take those bribes. It's the only way to keep my kid from getting sick every time I wake up and say hi to him in the morning. And maybe I wouldn't take them if this bankrupt administration just paid its people enough to give a damn. But when corruption is the only way to take care of my own people, then what do you expect from me? So no, I'm sorry, I can't do this job as fast as you think I can. Your demands are unreasonable and I am incapable. I'm trying as hard as I can and I'm still losing, so fuck you, fuck this country, fuck this job. So I think that if you go into this game with a kind of precautionary mindset, then it'll still feel worth the purchase. Things get pretty frustrating, but not in an inappropriate way. There might not be enough there mechanically to justify the time and money it takes to play, but this thing successfully makes a game system out of the desperation, frustration, and never-ending poverty that characterized an entire era. It also makes a historical fictional allegory out of it that makes this world seem a whole lot like their own. It's funny, it's scary, it's insightful, and it's relevant. And for that, it's a pretty damn cool game. And throughout the frustrating, repetitive grind that is playing it, it earned a hell of a lot of my respect. I highly encourage that everyone at least check out the demo, but if you're about to purchase the full version, then keep in mind that the kind of gameplay in the demo might lose its novelty after the first few hours. But after thinking about it for a while, you might realize that that's kind of the point, and that it also never really stopped being fun, for whatever fun is supposed to mean in this kind of case.